Okay, let's make our form more form-like so it actually does something. And we'll head back to VS Code, and inside our form, inside the tabbed area, then we've done this before. We're going to use the template forms once again. And I'm going to specify a template reference variable and call it edit form. And we're going to set this equal to ngForm. And inside our member edit component, let's create a method to update the form as well. So I'm going to call this update member. And for the time being, we're just going to console.log and say this.member just to take a look at the output. And we'll say this.toaster. In fact, let's bring in the toaster because we're going to notify the user if it has been successful. So I'm going to say private toaster equals inject, and we're going to inject the toaster service. And then below the console.log, we'll say list.toaster.success, and we'll just say profile updated successfully. And then we'll go back to our templates, and where we've got the form, we'll just add the ng-submit, and we'll say update member. And we've got a submit button for the form, but our button is not actually inside the form. It's elsewhere. So if I was to use this button to save the changes, and I give the button a type of submit, well, is this going to work? And if I go and take a look and I click on Save Changes, well, I don't see my toast because we're not doing anything to check before displaying the toast. It means nothing is happening when we click on this button. So we effectively need to tell our button about which form it should be interacting with because it's not actually inside the form tag. And a way that we can do that is to give the form an ID. And we'll give our form an ID equal to edit form. And then inside our button, we can tell it which form it's going to be used with. And we just need to say edit form, which matches the ID of the form. And if we go back and click the Save Changes button, then we get to see the profile updated successfully toast. Now we also want to see if any changes have been made to this form. At the moment, we're just displaying this alert regardless of whether or not something has changed, and we need to know the status of this form to be able to make a more informed decision about whether to display that alert. And in order to do that, then we're going to need to use our form inside our component. So where we've got the alerts, and while I've got the alert permanently displayed, I do actually want to remove a bit of padding from this as well because it is taking up too much room. So I'm just going to say pb-0, and that should give this a more appropriate amount of padding. And then we want to add a conditional so that we only display this if our form is dirty, as in changes have been made. So let's add a conditional, and we'll say if, and we need to use our edit form and see its dirty property. And we can do that. We have access to our template reference variables inside a template. And inside the code block, we can cut our alert and we can paste it inside there. And if we go and take a look, then we see the alert has disappeared. But if we start typing, well, it comes back up again. And if I've got a clean form, I just refresh the page, we do not see the alert. And we can do something similar for the button as well. So let's go back to the template again. And where we have our button, then let's move some of this stuff down because it's getting busy. And we'll also give this a disabled property. Now this button is receiving this information, so we put it inside square brackets. And we're going to say disabled, and we're going to use edit form.dirty. And in fact, we want the opposite there. So we're going to disable the button if the form is not dirty. That means there are no changes and there's nothing to submit. So if we go back and take a look at this, we can see our button is disabled until we make a change, and then our button is once again available. Now, when we do submits, our changes, we want to reset our form so the form becomes not dirty, and we disable the button again, and this alert goes away after we have saved the changes. And to do that, we're going to need to access the template form inside the component. So let's head back to VS Code, and inside our component, then I do not currently have access to the form itself because it is a template form. And if I try and say access list.edit form, for instance, I don't have this at this time. Now, our template technically is considered a child of our component. So if I want to access a template reference variable, which we have inside this form, then I need to use a feature of Angular called viewChild, so I can see the child component information. So inside the member edit component, let's come up to the top, and I'm going to add a viewChild, and we use a decorator, so I'll add the @ and we're going to use viewChild inside here. And we need to specify the selector. What is it that we're selecting here? And we're selecting the edit form. And then we give it a variable name that we can use inside our component. So I'm going to call it edit form. And then it's going to be a type of ng form. And we'll make it optional, because when our component initializes, the component's initialized first, and then the view, the template, is initialized. So at the time of component construction, then we do not have the edit form. And that's why it's giving us the warning there, saying, hey, this could be undefined, because it will be when our component is instantiated. And then we can make use of our edit form functionality inside our component. So then I can say list.editForm.reset, for example, and we can reset it to this.member. As once we have submitted the form, then this member will be updated, and then we're effectively resetting the form to those values contained in list.member. Well, that's the system, and it gives me an opportunity to demonstrate something as well that I was referring to regarding the naming of our inputs, particularly this one, because a common mistake is to put this in lowercase, because we don't get any compiler support with this if we make a change like that. And let me just show you the effect of that. So if I start typing inside here, we've got the reset form, and we're setting it to this.member, and I click Save Changes. Then the profile's updated, but look what happened to the looking for. It all disappeared. And if I refresh the page, obviously we're not saving these changes, but when I do this, then we lose the information in there. And that's because the name doesn't match the model. So this has to be accurate, and it has to match what we have in here, because if I do that same demonstration again and save changes, then we retain the text inside there. So just a small point about accuracy, really. And what we'll take a look at next, if a user does make a change to their component and then they decide to click elsewhere in our application and go back to the edit profile, then those changes have been lost. And we're going to take a look at a way to prevent the user from moving elsewhere until they confirm if there are changes inside the form. And that's coming next.